Welcome to this class. Today we will be talking about management of procurement contracts. As you all know, the procurement is involved in contracts. Every time you enter into contracts with suppliers for purposes of ensuring that both the supplier and the buyer are able to have a win-win relationship. So what is contract management? So contract management involves negotiation of terms and conditions of governing a contract and ensuring adherence to the terms and conditions. So when you are entering into a contract with suppliers, in one way or another, you will be able to negotiate some of the terms and conditions that will help you or that will guide you during your service or during your involvement with a particular buying organization. And contract management plays a critical role in ensuring that that is possible. Any changes to the contract should be well documented and properly communicated to all parties involved. So it must be clear to every person that is involved in the contract that the aspect of communication must be very clear. So all procurement agreements should be finalized with a contract so as to mitigate any risks that may hinder in achieving the contract. So there must be issues on how well you are going to mitigate some of those risks. And one of the key areas is to ensure that you are able to finalize on the agreement between the supplier and the buyer. So contract management has helped in increasing supplier productivity. And this is one of the best practices that any organization can be able to get involved in. So we have various phases of contract management. One of the phases is contract preparation, where you have to identify all your needs in a contract. The other important phase is writing down the contract, where you'll be able to write down the actual contract and ensure that it is properly worded and up to date. The other important phase is negotiating the contract, where you'll be able to talk with your various parties to ensure that you come up with the best terms and conditions that will be able to guide you during your engagement by both parties. Then get approvals of the contract. You also need to get approval from the necessary supervisor or the manager in charge so that he can be able to finalize the deal and ensure that the contract is up and running. Then executing the contract is another, and this involves signing of the contract from both parties to make it official. So both parties must be able to sign the contract for the contract to be official. Then recording any amendments and revisions. Once in a while, you can be required to amend some of those articles or some of those terms. So it's always important to ensure that you record all those amendments. So what are some of the essential elements of a contract? The first one is an offer and acceptance. An offer is where one party promises to perform an act to another party with the intention of creating legal relationship. And acceptance on the other side is the act or the statement given in response to or in accordance to an offer. So both parties must be able to have legal intentions to create a legal relationships. So both parties must have that intention to be able to accept or create a legal relationship. There must also be mutual acceptance by both parties, and a contract must be fully accepted by both parties entering into a contract. Then we also have voluntary acceptance. Both parties must be willing to enter into a contract freely and without being forced. Then the other aspect is the consideration aspect. Each party must accept that a contract has value, and the value of the contract is assumed by contracting parties that accept the proposal. And lastly, we have competence, where both parties must have the legal capacity to enter into a contract. That is, must have sound mind, must be of the right age to enter the contract. So the definition of terms, those ones will be able to read and understand because there are very many. Then the other thing that we must talk about today is the contract management for goods, services, and works. So contract management includes preparing documentation, processing the documents, and giving approvals where necessary. That involves monitoring the contract all through till the end. It also involves administering any variations and modification of the contract if necessary. And lastly, it also involves the termination or cancelling of the contract if not being handled well by the contractor. So poorly administered contract can give way to corrupt practices. So you must be able to ensure that you administer your contracts well. If you don't do that, some people might take advantage, and this might affect how you relate, and it might lead to corruption practices. Variations also must be looked upon too. In the event we have variations, we must be able to communicate in advance so that both parties know what they're expected to do. This creates the essence of good contract management. So it is always important for the organization to be able to have good contract management. The contract administrator has the following responsibility. Number one is to monitor the performance of the contract according to the set standard. So they must ensure that the contract is up and running. They also make sure that the contract submits all required documents and correspondence regarding to the contract. So they must ensure all documentations are present during the contract. They also ensure that the procuring entity pays the contractor on time and according to the set provisions in the contract. So payment is one of the aspects that is very critical in any organization. Therefore, the contract administrator must be able to ensure suppliers or the contractors are paid early. It also helps in making modification to the contract where needed, and they also ensure our contract is completed before the closing of the contract file, and that is completed in time. They also ensure all the contract administration records are properly stored and up to date, and help in handling of any issues pertaining the contract as long as they are in his power. The other thing that we must talk about today is the issue of contract file. So what is a contract file? So it is always important to ensure that you maintain a contract file for all the vendors. So the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act says that no contract is formed between the vendor and the procuring entity unless they enter into a written contract. So the contract file can either be for goods, works, or services, and it is always opened after the contract is signed and usually opened by the contract administrator. So the file is used for keeping records of the actual performance of the contract and contains the following. Number one, an appointed contract procurement team must be filed there. Then we have the various contractual documents that are very critical during the contract. It also has the project implementation schedule at the procurement stage, the procurement implementation plan, which shows the timelines for specific actions. It also sometimes has a summary of the bill of quantities with the timeliness to be observed, and also has the minutes of the review meetings. And these are commonly known as the site meeting because they're normally carried out during the construction and normally done in the contract site where the contract is normally done. The other thing is site meetings may address any issues concerning the project, but concentration is on the remaining three rights, that is the right quality, right quantity, and the right time. Where there is an incomplete or non-conformity, there will be snag list with suggestions and directives on how to have them sorted out within the timelines. It also has details of payment and completion certificate, all copies filled here. And it also has disputes, if any, and how they were resolved and recorded. The contract closure and the product handling over. So sometimes the contract is handled over the client, so it must be put here. The other thing we are going to talk about today is contract negotiation. Negotiation is the process that parties involved in a negotiation that takes to reach an agreement. So when two parties or more come together so that they are able to reach a certain agreement, then we are saying that is a contract negotiation. It is normally limited with very few negotiations taking place after the contract award. but when required. So negotiations have the ability to improve the procurement contract by a great deal. This is because it helps to reduce the risks, the costs, and even the uncertainty in the contract. When doing negotiations, procurement units should ensure that there are no conflict of interest. So contract negotiation tactics may include competition. This is one of the most adversarial style. In this type of style, there has to be a winner and a loser, and it works well where there is a need for a faster negotiation or where there are not many variables in place. For example, a variable like price can form hostility when it comes to the negotiation, and it might lead to one team losing. Then we have accommodation. This is a submissive style of negotiation. The accommodative team always lets the other party win on issues. Accommodators put relationship as a top priority. And we also have avoiders. This style is passive and aggressive. Avoiders come across as less transparent and honest. The avoiders simply avoid the situation. For instance, rather than being accommodative, avoiders can avoid confrontation and instead focus on reaching an agreement. Then we also have compromise. This is a style that involves both parties meeting each other halfway. One side makes some concession and the other side does the same. There are no clear winners. In the end, instead, fair results are achieved. And lastly, we have collaborating. This technique ensures that there is need for both parties are met. Parties brainstorm on how to reach a mutual agreement and also how the decision made will favor both parties. So what are some of the elements of a negotiation? Number one is the technical aspect. This includes the quality warranties, after sales service, life cycle support, and maintenance agreement. Then we also have the special terms, which include any guarantee of payment, terms, bonds, and insurance. Then we also have the issue of time frames. These may include delivery dates, milestone responses, duration of the contract, etc. We also have information delivery, like the content of the report, frequency of reporting, acceptance criteria for the works. The aspect of manpower is also very critical. This includes the team members who are involved in the contract delivery. Then performance initiatives. These are incentives related to costs, delivery, quality, and incentives. The other thing we are going to talk about today is the procurement file. This file is very important in contract management. This is because it is used in preparation of the procurement before the award of the contract. So the procurement file contains the following information on procurement requisition, the bidding document received, evaluation report, information on contract award, and correspondence of the procurement. So requisition in public sector is the requirement in law that, subject to all approved procurement plans, all procurement must start with a requisition. So in case you want items, the user department requires items. They must be able to fill the requisition note so that it can kickstart the process of procurement. The specification, the user unit must also provide specification for all the goods, services, and works required. So specification gives a list of attributes that are needed in a certain product or service. It also has the procurement implementation plan. This plan includes the procurement method to be applied and the various issues that are very critical when it comes to procurement. We also have the bidding document, which is a standard copy of the bid document. It also contains the advertisement, a copy of the advert, whether sent normally or electronically. We have the bid opening, the evaluation report, the professional opinion, award decision, notification of all the bidders who are notified, either successful or unsuccessful. Then the letter of acceptance. This comes from the supplier, and the signed contract. A contract is signed if there is no appeal. Contract management plan. This is usually prepared by the project manager and usually contains information on how the project will be administered. It focuses on the key areas of the project and usually contains the following information. Number one is the background information of the project or the contract. So it basically gives a view or a preview of the whole project information. It also has the name and the contract management team. So you must be able to come up with a team that is going to form part of the contract. So it must be always included. We also have the duties and responsibilities of both parties in the contract, including the contractor and the project manager and the teams. Any provision regarding the contract is also very critical, and the mode of communication to be used during the project. Then we also have to have how to prepare the contract review report and timeliness of completion of the project and details of the contract and any other information. We also need to understand the stakeholders management plan. Stakeholders are people or groups with an interest in a certain project. They are always involved in execution or affected by the outcome of the project. So any person who has an interest or is affected by the outcome of a certain project is a stakeholder. So many projects have many different stakeholders, some of whom may have competing interests and have significant influence on the success or failure of the project. So it is always important that the stakeholder management plan is able to offer a set of techniques that will help to harness the positive influence and minimize the negative influence. It also helps stakeholders in accessing their interest and influence and developing a way to communicate and manage any finally engaging and influencing stakeholders. And it also ensures all stakeholders are effectively involved in running the project and that effective coordination of stakeholders throughout the project takes place. So what are some of the requirements? Then we also have requirement management plan. This is a document that provides information necessary to effectively manage a project from definition of the project to traceability until the delivery. So once in a while, it is always important to have this requirement management plan because this is what gives you the necessary required information that will help you to be able to complete the project without any difficulties. It is usually created during the planning phase, and it is meant for the project manager. So the project management team, sponsors, and any top official who has the responsibility of managing the project. This document also helps in controlling changes and communicating to the stakeholders throughout the life of the project. The other thing is the contract review report, which is very critical for goods, works, and services. In large procurement, there should be slots for reviewing meetings in the contract management plan. Reviewing meetings are very crucial as they allow the project manager or team to have face-to-face communication with the vendor pertaining the contract performance. So you're able to communicate one-on-one with the various contractors who are performing a certain project. The supplier should be given enough time to read and understand the review report. And if any modification should be in writing, must be justified. The supplier can also propose changes to the contract, and the procurement unit should review any changes to make sure that they do not conflict with the original requirement. After holding a review meeting, a status report for the project should be prepared. The project status report contains the following. Number one, an executive summary for the contract, the performance report for the project performance and budget, environmental issues regarding the contract, performance rating of the contractor, general observation of the contract, timeliness of the contract, risk analysis of the contract, and performance and quality cost of the project. It is always important that the contract administrator to report the outcome of the review meeting to the management of the procurement entity for them to fully be aware of what is happening during the project. The report will also provide lessons for procuring entity and project management team on how to carry out the future projects. So how do you coordinate for payment for goods, works, and services? So payment is very, very critical when it comes to the project or contract management. So the procurement entity also needs to pay the contractor according to the terms agreed, at the payment should be timely. It is the duty of the contractor to submit his invoices for payment to be made, and payment shall not be made to the contractor unless he has submitted the invoices, and it should be in accordance with the provision of the contract. Failure to pay the contractor in the agreed period, this will give the procuring entity a bad name. So it's always important to pay the contractor as you agreed in the contract. If a debt becomes pending bill, the procuring entity may be forced to pay the debt amount plus an interest, which is determined by the prevailing commercial bank rates. All invoices should be paid 30 days after submission. In case of any question and you feel you want to ask a question, always feel free to ask the question. Thank you for listening. Let's meet next time.